We've talked about the theory of creating a bass line from, let's say, a minor pentatonic scale, and I started to give you an example of it on the bass. Here is the kind of MIDI creation that came out of that. So I've already set up a project, and since we're on the screen, I just want to point out a couple things to you here. First of all, I want you to notice that we've got some markers already set up. So I'm already kind of following the form of the tune, and I use the words verse and chorus, but it could be anything like A, B, C, D, or whatever you want to put in there. But if you don't know how to use the marker track, definitely check that out. So it's this little flag right here. When I click on that, it opens the marker track. And you can create a new marker just by placing your cursor on the screen and hitting the plus sign. If you're using the Pro Tools shortcuts and you've got a numeric keypad, you can also hit the enter key on the numeric keypad, and that will also create a new marker. So we've got the overall session set up with markers. I've got a couple instruments on here. That's something we should be able to do already by now. And then I just started working on the bass line in MIDI. And this idea of using kind of the flat 7 to the 1 in C minor pentatonic. Okay? So my first idea when I came to the keyboard and did it in MIDI looked like this. And I'm going to show you kind of the transition or the development of the idea from the very basic first idea through what it eventually becomes. So let's make the screen a little bit bigger here. In fact, I'll go ahead and open up in the edit view so that we can kind of see it. All right, here we go. Just flat 7 to 1. And then at the end, it just goes down to the E, which is still part of the chord, and walks up to a G, right? So it's flat 7, 1, E, F, F sharp, G, and then back to the beginning again. So with the exception of some of these chromatic notes in here, which is really just a way to get from one place to another, everything that you see here is all minor pentatonic. Okay, just using those 5 notes. All right, so that was the first kind of idea. And then I kind of took it and added another little variation to it. So one of the things that you can do in Studio One is you can create layers on a track. So the way that you do it is just with 2 fingers on the keyboard. You go down to layers and just create a new layer, add layer. And I've already done that. I'm going to open up the lanes here so you can see my layers. So the layer that we're listening to now is layer 1. It's the original idea. If I want to hear layer 2, I just click on this little arrow and I activate the layer. I put it on the top, and now we can hear layer 2. So let's check that out. All right, so we've added the 4, 5. All right, so now I'm playing basically the same thing, but I'm playing a 4, 5 right there, right? And then the ending is the same. So now we've added one more element to the bass line. Then I felt like I wanted to do one more thing to kind of turn it into almost like a song within itself. Like the bass line in this case can kind of carry so much of the theme of the groove. So here's layer number 3. This is kind of my final version of the bass line. And on this one, I added another little walk up that I kind of liked. So let's check it out. Cool. So it kind of walks up, and then I use, I use the higher octave of the B flat C right there because I'm kind of I'm so far up in the range that I wanted to kind of connect that idea back to this idea without jumping all the way down. So that's, maybe a little too much, but it's a little gratuitous, but I liked it. So I just said, I'm going to do it. So that's the final bass line. Okay, cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close these layers, and I'm going to take this bass line and I'm going to move it into place. So when I started recording it, I didn't start at the beginning of verse 1. I actually started a bar before. So after 4 clicks, I was raring to go, and I just started playing. But if I want to move this over, it's real easy. I'm in grid mode, right? And I can just take it and I can just drag it over. So now it's starting at the marker that says verse 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim this thing to be exactly 4 measures long. So you can see the length changing on the screen where it says length 4.02. That means 4 plus 2 beats. And then if I go back to there, it's 4.00. It's exactly 4. And again, if you're in grid mode, it will snap to those grid lines. So now I've got this bass line that's exactly 4 bars long. And if I wanted to duplicate it using the keyboard command Control D or Command D, I can just instantly duplicate it and make it 8 bars. And in the case of this project, you can literally use the same bass line for the whole thing. So I can just go like this. And that's not cheating. So it's real easy just to duplicate the bass part. And I'm going to show you the possibility of changing one thing in the second verse. But right now, we'll just leave it the same. It's just the same bass line all the way through. So the next step is to try to find a drum groove that complements the bass line. So in our class, we talked about how the bass, certainly it covers the roots. It plays the fundamental of the chord, or in this case, it's playing a vamp. But it's also a rhythmic instrument. It's like a drummer. So we have to come up with a drum groove now that fits with this bass line. And I'm going to start by giving myself some eighth notes just to kind of subdivide the time so I can feel it. And I can just go to my hi-hat sound here and just add some eighth notes. So here we go from the beginning. Cool. And if you screw up, who cares? Whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and quantize this part. And I want to bring your attention to one thing that I did differently on this project, which is I added some swing in my quantization. If I were to play this completely perfectly straight as 16th notes, it would sound a little stiff because it's got a little bit of a swing to it. So I can't tell you what the number's supposed to be. I typed in 44 and I thought, that sounds pretty good. I could still change that number and I could apply that swing to everything that's in the track, but I just needed it to be a little bit uneven so that it's not perfectly 16th notes, just to give it a little bit of swing to the feel. Okay, so now I've got some eighth notes on the drums. I'm going to try to come up with a kick drum pattern, maybe that kind of matches what the bass player is playing. So let's see if I can do that. Here we go. Right, so I'm catching those first 2 eighth notes. Then there's that dong on the E, which is kind of that long note. And I thought that would be a good low note to catch with the kick drum too. Notice I'm not playing every note that the bass plays, right, on the kick drum, but I'm trying to line up with some of those notes so that they feel like they mesh together, not fighting with each other. If I play just a straight rhythm on the drums, it might kind of fight the pattern that the bass is playing. All right, so let me go ahead and quantize that. And then I'm just going to add some backbeats and just see where we are. Maybe this will be cool just like it is. Let's see. Here we go, 2s and 4s. Cool. So that could work, just real simple, straight ahead. 2s and 4s, the bass is following the bass guitar. And that would totally work. And a lot of times for just ideas, you just need something that's simple, that's locked in, and then maybe as you go on and start building the rest of the tune around this, it will evolve and change. So if I were you doing this project, understand that certainly I can copy those drums for that first verse there, but when I get to chorus one, even though the bass is going to stay the same, I want you to change the drums. So you still have to think compositionally with the drum set part and maybe come up with some variation that switches us into a different gear. All right. The other thing I wanted to show you in the kind of computer tutorial version of this is that on the project sheet it talks about transposing the bass. So there's a couple different ways to do this, but the idea is to take like a bass vamp and just move it to a different tonal center so that when we get to the second verse, the whole thing kind of shifts harmonically. And there's a pretty easy way to do this. So if I go to the second verse and I double click on my bass part, so you can see the bars that are highlighted right here. I'm going to just kind of compress my notes so that I can grab everything here. And I'm going to just select all of these notes. Okay, so now they're all selected, and right now, we're headed for a C. That's kind of like the tonic. But if I wanted to, I could literally just drag these notes up to a different tonal center, and it would preserve the line, but it would move them, it would shift them to a different tonal center. So let's go to the 4, which would be a pretty common place to go. And I'm going to take this C, I'm just going to drag it and put myself in grid mode. I'm going to drag it up to an F, which is the 4. Cool. Now it's the same bass line, but it's being played on the 4. So I'm going to back up a measure, and I'm going to show you what this sounds like. Okay. So let me get rid of that bar. I'm going to duplicate this one. So now at verse 2, maybe I'll even change this. I'm going to call this, key change. It's not truly a key change, but more of a tonal center change. So let's back up. I want to show you what it sounds like one pattern before and then with the key change. And just to make it groovy, I'll go ahead and put some drums behind it. So here we go. Ready? This is chorus 1. This is in the key of C, right? Here it comes. Getting kind of high there. So that's cool, right? It's the same bass line, but we've kind of shifted it to a different tonality. And it does get kind of high. So maybe what I would do then is I would grab this section that I just moved up to that F and transpose the whole thing down 1 octave. So if we wanted to transpose this section down because it's kind of getting too high, I can just highlight these 2 areas. I'm going to use 2 fingers, go down to musical functions, and transpose. And now I can subtract an octave. I can just hit -1 octave, hit OK. And if you look on the screen, you should see those notes move down. 1, 2, 3, go. See them move? So now when we go from this section to the new section, it's still going to an F, but instead of going up to an F, it's going down to an F. Yep. Cool. So you can hear how how easy it is just to move things around just by making a selection, going to those musical changes. What is it called? Musical functions, selecting transpose and just moving the whole thing. And you can do it, by the way, by a different number than an octave, right? So we could have done the first step using that feature and choosing, the intervals that would create a perfect fourth. All right. So next thing I want to show you is how I took this idea of the bass line and the basic drum groove, and then I put them into real instruments and recorded them with real instruments, and just tried to bring them to life and make them into music. So that's the next video.